Greetings. My name is Lisa Twilley Woodruff, and I am a senior consultant here at the UAMS Office of Organizational Development. Today we're going to be talking about conducting performance evaluations that count. The completion of this video will count as your training, so make sure you watch the entire video. So let's get started. So I usually ask this in the face-to-face session. I ask folks to talk about their experience as a manager, and what I find is there's often lots of experience in the room. So many of you already have experience with performance evaluations, so hopefully as we cover this material, maybe there's something new that you can pick up and take away with you. Those of you that are new to as a manager, hopefully this will help as you go through your performance evaluations with your employees, and you can use some of the skills that you learn here today. So true or false, people leave managers and not organizations. So most people realize that they do leave managers. Some folks leave for better opportunities, but the truth of the matter is how we treat people affects whether they stay or whether they go. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So first we're going to talk about employee engagement and what that means to the entire process. So how do we use performance evaluations as a tool to engage our employees? And then we're going to talk about the entire process as a whole. So it's an ongoing thing, and I want to reiterate that throughout this training today. Then we're going to talk about some high-level communication skills and effective questions. We're going to talk about how to set goals for our employees. We're going to talk about PFCC. We're going to talk about what that means later on too, and how it pertains and that its role in performance evaluations. And then finally, we're going to briefly touch on the evaluations ratings. So let's move on. So true or false, what do you think? High performers don't need extra motivation. So I asked this in my face-to-face class. We get some feedback, and what we find out is most people do understand that high performers do need motivation. So while high performers are good at motivating themselves, they too can become unhappy if they are not engaged on a personal level. So what we find is high performers are really, really good at making sure they do a great job, but they too get burnt out. And so we often kind of live by the idea that no news is good news, but when it comes to feedback, no feedback still is no feedback. People want feedback. People want the atta-girls and atta-boys. So true or false, managers know how to engage employees. So do you think that managers just inherently know how to engage employees? The title of manager does not grant the ability to engage employees. It is a skill that requires training and practice to be effective. So the good news, the big takeaway today, is this is a learnable skill. This is often something interesting that I run across as far as when I meet new managers or new leaders. So if you think of in the IT world, so you have your computer programmers, and then the best computer programmer gets promoted as the manager. Not necessarily based on their leadership skills, but on their skills and knowledge in the work that they do. So just because you are now a manager does not mean you have the ability or the inherent ability to engage employees. But the good news is you can learn it. So let's briefly talk about employee engagement and what this means. So this is a really, really high level definition of employee engagement. And so there's a couple bullet points that you can see here. So a sense of meaningfulness. So that means that as your job as a manager is to make sure that your employees have a sense of meaningfulness in their work, whatever that means. If their job really is paperwork, how do you think you give that employee a sense of meaningfulness? Maybe you let them understand their role in the bigger picture. Because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is, as a UAMS employee, no matter what my role in this institution encompasses, my role affects patient outcomes. Another part of this is a sense of control. So having some say-so, or at least feeling like they are listened to, that can give an employee a sense of control, a sense of accomplishment, getting things done, or celebrating milestones, right? So if I feel like I never get anything done, I'm probably not going to have a sense of accomplishment. So how do you instill that? And of course, a sense of growth. And this is where the performance evaluation process really comes into play. So this is a chance to gather information and talk about what does that employee want to do? Where do they see themselves going? Or what do they see themselves bringing to the team, and how can you develop that? And that's instilling a sense of growth. And of course, a sense of community. For some of y'all, this may sound silly, but the truth of the matter, we all spend a lot of time here at work. I don't know about you, but I bring the best part of my day. I'm the best person in the best part of my day at UAMS. So this is my best. My family at the end of the day might get an exhausted version of me, but when I'm at work, this is my best. And if I don't feel a sense of community, a sense of belonging, I'm probably not going to stick around. I'm going to start looking for other opportunities. Performance management process. So what I want to know is, what do you think is the purpose of the performance evaluation process? So the purpose of evaluation process is feedback and recognition. So this is your chance to give that employee some valuable feedback, whether it's good or bad. These aren't always pretty. It's a chance to give some recognition with regards to what did they do well. At the end of the day, we're people, and we need to know what we're doing right. We need to know what we're doing wrong. What can we do better, right? It's to create some better communication. Whatever time you can give that person, make sure you protect it, because you're creating a better relationship with that employee. It's a time to identify special skills, abilities, and interests. So this is where you get to put on your coaching hat, take off the manager role as far as like getting work done, put on your coaching hat, and let's talk about how you can help them, do their best performance. So what kind of interests do they have? Where do they see themselves going, right? That kind of rolls into that identifying and training development needs. So what do they need to get to where they want to go, right? Are there trainings that they can attend? Maybe you don't know that right now. Maybe you don't realize that they want to do something else, or they want to grow. And of course, goal setting. And this is part of the online performance evaluation process. So when you see in the next training the actual software, that you're going to be using, then you will understand how to set those goals properly. So all this to say, this is all part of employee engagement. So let's look at the evaluation, the whole process as a whole. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this figure, but the truth of the matter is, the one big takeaway that I want you to see is that it's an ongoing process. It's not just a once-a-year thing. So that being said, don't hang on to feedback and blindside your employees at their performance review. Okay, so if something's going awry, you need to have check-in points. And I'm going to talk about that as we move through this material, but it's ongoing feedback, as you can see. There's going to be times where you're going to have check-ins. You're going to have get some employee input. Then you're going to have that performance evaluation. Of course, also, please keep in mind there's documentation. So we're going to talk about that too. So why is it important to monitor and document throughout the review cycle? So as I just said, documentation is super important. So you need to have accuracy. We're human beings. We're going to forget stuff. You need to have consistency. That's going to help you be that much more trustworthy manager, because you're going to be seen as consistent and fair, because you're not just giving kudos to one person. You're making sure that you're documenting everything throughout the process. And of course, it's going to build accountability. So we like to talk about accountability on the employee side, making our employees accountable. But what about accountability when it comes to ourselves as managers? So let's talk about what I mean as far as that goes. So if there is an issue and you want to get that person, so you get that employee's input, so what can we do about this? Make sure you build in some accountability with regards to, okay, in 2 weeks, I'm going to come back to you and we're going to revisit this. So that's moving, it's forward movement, and it's reviewing things throughout the entire cycle. It's not just waiting for that performance evaluation time to kind of, hash everything out in a one big, giant, once-a-year meeting, okay? So it's accountability that you're touching base with someone throughout the year. So let's talk about general versus specific statements. And this is the what I mean as far as what you're going to input into the system. So you could say, Terry needs to communicate better. Heck, you could say my name there and say Lisa needs to communicate better. And it's probably true. But this really doesn't tell us something. It's a very general statement, and while it might be true, it doesn't really give me enough information on what needs to be changed so I can be a better communicator. So let's look at this next statement. It says, Terry's silence in meetings makes people assume agreement. This has resulted in misunderstandings which can cause problems within the team. We need Terry's input, and Terry needs to help the team by speaking out more. So some things are happening in this statement, and I really, really like it. So first, it tells Terry exactly what they need to do, okay? So they know in meetings now they need to speak up. It also, not just knowing what they need to do, it gives them permission to do it. I like this statement a lot because there's a lot of different ways that this could work. So imagine Terry, if Terry is a new employee, doesn't have a lot of work experience, they may not know that they can speak up in meetings. They may not have that confidence. This type of thing or this type of statement will help them get that confidence. It could be a cultural thing. So think about different cultures and how you show respect. So if Terry comes from a culture where when you're quiet and you listen, that's showing respect, but now they have permission to speak up. So this statement is very, very sensitive, and it gives a recipe, if you will, for what they need to do to be better. So they know exactly what to do. So let's look at documentation examples. So the don't is don't document attitude. For example, Sue does not take her work seriously and is lazy. So if you put that in the system, and then of course if you know anything about the performance evaluation process, which you're going to learn more about the actual process in the next training, but for those of you who don't know, you're going to fill out your performance evaluation form. It's an online form. It's going to be sent to your employee. They're going to have time to look it over, and then you're going to meet to talk about it. So imagine Sue looks in her performance evaluation, and she sees that you have now called her lazy, and you also think she doesn't take her work seriously. So let's think about what that does to Sue and what that does to the upcoming meeting that you're supposed to be having with Sue. It also doesn't give her much information. It's really just going to make her mad. So imagine instead you're documenting behavior. Okay, so let's look at this one about Jennifer. So Jennifer has not been delegating routine work and has therefore missed 2 important deadlines on monthly reports. So it tells Jennifer exactly what has happened, right? It's not documenting her attitude. We're not saying that Jennifer is lazy and can't do her work. It doesn't say that Jennifer, has been, Jennifer rather, talk about her kids versus doing her work. Nothing like that. So nothing subjective. It is merely documenting the actual behavior. But something else is something that was happening really, really awesome in this statement. So let's look back at this. So Jennifer has not been delegating routine work. So just in case Jennifer doesn't know this, Jennifer now has permission to delegate her routine work. That means she doesn't have to keep up with her normal routine in addition to maybe perhaps projects. It gives her permission to ask for help. At the end of the day, sometimes folks need permission to ask for help. So just be mindful of how you document, and remember, be very, very specific and make sure there are solutions in there or what expected behaviors, right? So make sure they know exactly. So like I said, Terry needs to communicate better. Great, everybody does, but let's think about in what ways. So do you agree? It's not what you say, it's how you say it. I like to ask this question. It's somewhat of a trick question, meaning that I think it's a little bit of both. So it is what you say and it is how you say it. So you have to be mindful of your words, you have to be mindful of your tone, your body language, you have to be mindful of who you're saying it to. So with that being said, we've all heard of the golden rule, right? Treat people how you would like to be treated. But I really like the platinum rule, which is treat people how they want to be treated. And I want to take this one step further. I really think it needs to be this. Treat people how they need to be treated. So we all know that everybody's a little bit different and very unique. So it's not just what they want, but sometimes this is really what they need. You're going to have folks that are very direct communicators. They don't need an hour. They don't even need 20 minutes to go through this stuff. They just want to know, what's the bottom line? What's the information? What is it I need to fix, or what did I do great? And they need to move on. Other folks, they need to have that time to get comfortable, so it doesn't feel like a trip to the principal's office. They need to be seen as a person, and they need that time taken with them. Okay, so remember, treat people how they need to be treated. So engaging through communication. So here are some tips. So I have listen deeply, ask, don't tell, create, sustain, developmental alliance, focus on moving forward positively, and building accountability. Let's talk about those. So I have listen deeply, and a lot of times people go, do you mean active listening? I mean, shut off everything else and make sure you're focusing on that person. Don't text during these meetings. Don't try to answer emails during these meetings. Make sure you are focusing on that person. Make sure you're not making your grocery list when someone's talking. Make sure you're focusing on their words, focusing on their facial expressions, you're focusing on their body language. You're fully listening to that person. Ask, don't tell. This one's very difficult because sometimes we do need to tell people, right? Sometimes we do just need to tell them, look, you need to do it this way. It's understandable. But as much as possible, make sure you stay curious. Make sure you're asking questions to get more information, right? You want to find out. You want to find out how things are working or how things are not working. At the end of the day, these meetings are there so you can become an alliance with this. You can have an alliance with this person. You can help them. You can be their coach, right? So if you're working and you care about their performance, you're coaching them. You're figuring out ways to get them information that they need. You're talking about maybe pairing them with another employee to learn new skills, or you're talking about sending them to trainings, or just talking about sending them to trainings that are already here at UAMS. So you're looking at the resources and you're helping them become better at what they do. At the end of the day, you want to focus on moving forward positively. So a lot of times, these meetings aren't always pretty. You're going to have to talk about difficult things. You're going to have difficult conversations. But at the end of the day, you want to move forward on a positive note. So make sure that this is about how can we move this forward positively. Again, asking, don't telling. Ask them, how can we, so we've talked about these difficult things. We have some ideas on how to move forward positively. You tell me, what do you need from me to make this happen, right? Ask them. And of course, you want to build accountability. And I kind of touched on this before, and this is accountability for ourselves. So if you're asking someone, for a solution, and they have one, and it might work, and so they want to try it, make sure you have a check-in point. And it doesn't have to be, we're going to set an hour meeting along. Meaning, I'm going to see you in the hallway, and I'm going to catch you. In about 2 weeks, I'm just going to check in. I'm going to say, how is that working? Do we need to revisit this? Okay? The accountability at the end of the day is on you. That's accountability. Okay, so discussing performance issues. And like I said, it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be glowing, right? So discussing these performance evaluations, here are some strategies. And one strategy is the sandwich criticism method. So that means you're going to say something positive. Then you're going to give your constructive feedback, and then you're going to say something positive. This is just a method. It is not the end-all be-all. But for those of you who maybe need a little bit more structure and this makes you feel more comfortable, this is an approach that can work. In my opinion, the best approach is simply to ask them, how do they want their feedback? Meaning, how do they want to hear? Do they need positive, negative, or do they want to hear all the negative first? Meaning all the constructive criticism, they need that first and then the positive. Ask them what they need. How do they need their feedback, right? And this is how you can find out whether folks are direct communicators, they just need 10 minutes of your time, or folks that need to have time to kind of process them. Maybe there's an employee that needs you to help them process information a little bit more. So just ask them what they need. Performance evaluation, you're going to discuss the problem and the significance of the issue. So a lot of times when an employee is having an issue or failing to meet some sort of criteria, the thing about it is they don't understand the actual significance of that issue, right? Or maybe it's an employee who's consistently late and they don't understand how that impacts the rest of the team. So talk about that real impact. If you have a person who's late and it seems, or they're calling in, talk about how that impacts the workload for everyone else, right? Sometimes we can't see beyond ourselves, and that's your job to kind of help them see how what they bring to the table, how it affects the entire team. Make sure you get their input and possible solutions. Remember, these are the people that do the work. They see solutions. Not everything's going to be an amazing solution, but they're going to have input and they're going to be able to voice some of their ideas and that sort of thing. And make sure you really listen to those. Of course, you're going to provide feedback, right? You need to talk to people and make sure you don't sugarcoat things, because when you sugarcoat, you confuse. So this is all about making sure you give real feedback. And of course, you want to encourage them. You want to make sure that they see you as being on their side, okay? And of course, that accountability, right back, set that date to discuss progress. Whether it's just I'm going to run into you in the hallway and we're going to talk about it, or you're going to actually have a sit-down meeting, however you need to do it, but you're going to set that date. And then, of course, you want to be mindful of your body language. We don't often think about it, but this is where you can be a little bit more self-aware. So if you know that you frown often, make sure you're mindful of that. So if when somebody starts to say something that you think about a lot and you start to frown, be mindful of that. Maybe even call it out. You can say, look, when you're telling me something, I just start to I make a serious face because I'm starting to think about things. Another thing is, if you're going to cross your arms, you can kind of say, I'm not trying to be defensive. I'm just crossing my arms so I don't check my phone, right? So being mindful of the things that you do naturally, and you can talk about them or you can try to change them. It's up to you, as long as that is understood, that you're not really trying to send some kind of negative information. So let's talk about what we say, right? We talked about, it's not just how we say it, but it's actually what we say. So a couple things I like to talk about to be more mindful of is saying the word and versus the word but, because we all knows what happened, right? So if I walk in wearing a dress and someone goes, wow, Lisa, that's a really great dress, but, well, forget it. I'm not hearing that compliment. I want to hear what the but is, right? If you say and, it allows the person to fully take the positive and the negative, right? So for example, Lisa, you did a really great job on that project, and next time we're going to make sure you have enough help, that way you don't miss the deadline. So I can hear the entire thing. A, I hear that I did a great job, and B, I now know that you saw me struggle, and you now know that you can help me. I'm going to have help next time. I'm not just stranded, right? So it helps, it's more solution oriented and people can hear it, right? Avoid trigger words and phrases. So a trigger word would be calling, for example, when you did XYZ, that was a very stupid way to do it. So, and I've heard the argument a million times. I didn't call you stupid, I called what you said stupid. Or what you did stupid. So be mindful of that. People aren't going to make that differentiation. They just aren't. And of course, you don't want to put that sort of stuff on your performance evaluations at all. Phrases in the meetings, for example, if someone's starting to get emotional and you say, I'm going to need you to calm down, that's probably not going to work. I want you to think about the times that it's probably been said to you. It's probably not going to work. That's probably just going to escalate things. The truth of the matter is, some of these meetings are going to be emotional. Emotions are going to happen. That's just part of it. In our society, and especially in our professional world, we like to pretend, or we think it's polite not to notice someone's emotions. That might be polite, but the truth of the matter is, it's not going to get you the information you need. So if you see someone becoming emotional, it's okay to say, I see you're starting to become a little bit emotional. Can you tell me more about that? So remember to stay curious, right? Make sure you're asking what's going on. Or I can see, okay, something's bothering you. Tell me more about it. That way you're going to get the information you need. Okay, so don't be afraid of those emotions. And chances are it's going to de-escalate the situation, because at the end of the day, we're all people and we want to be seen. So beginning the evaluation meeting, be natural, establish a rapport, like I said, if necessary. If this person you know, or you have a really great relationship with them and they don't need to have this rapport, that's fine. Like I said, treat people how they need. And of course you want to explain the purpose of the meeting. So you want to make sure you're saying things like, we're going to talk about your evaluation, and I hope that this is a two-way discussion, and I want to hear from you. Okay, so you're explaining that purpose, right? And then closing the evaluation meeting. So you want to review and clarify. So one of the major things is you want to make sure that you leave with both of you understanding the same thing. So that's where clarifying and paraphrasing really come into play. So saying things like, I heard you say, or now we're about to end this meeting, so let's make sure we're on the same page. So going forward, we're going to do X, Y, Z, right? Some managers like to make sure that, to really make sure that it's understood, is go, okay, so moving forward, you're going to tell me what we're going to do, right? What did we talk about? Like I said, if you're working with an employee that maybe that kind of makes them feel like they're being put on the spot, probably not a good idea, right? But make sure you're clarified. Make sure you're summarizing things like, this is what we talked about, this is what we're going to do, so that you leave, with a mutual understanding of what's going to happen. And of course, like I said, you want to leave on that positive note. You want to make sure that that person knows that you are on their side. That's just it. All right, asking the right questions. So not every single one of these are a question. Some of these are just prompts, right? So tell me more about. You've probably heard me say that throughout this video today. Tell me more about that. Another great question is, what else? So if somebody tells you something, you can probe a little bit further by saying, what else? Okay. Here's some great questions. What specifically did they say? Right? How does that work in practice? What's the theory behind this? Right? Again, here's a phrase, sort of like take me on a tour type thing. So tell me how you produced that. Right? Tell me how you did that. Right? Tell me why that worked. Right? That sort of thing. So make sure that you're staying curious and you're asking questions that will get people to give you information, because these meetings are really important. You don't have time to sit down with each of your employees every day. So make sure that you're taking that time to really understand some of the difficulties, the challenges, and the great stuff that they're doing, right? Okay, so let's talk about SMART goals. So what are they? Why do we need to use them? And how do you write them? So as you can see by the image, this is pretty intuitive stuff. A SMART goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So let's talk about what I mean by that. So here's an example. Obtain master's degree. Great. Who doesn't want one, right? Who doesn't think that's not a great goal? Go get your master's degree. That's my goal. Well, the problem with that is it doesn't celebrate any short wins, right? So what if we broke it down to like this? Complete first year of graduate school by August 2018 as part of requirements for the Masters of Public Health, right? So I'm going to celebrate my wins year by year. It's smart, it's, specific. I'm going to get a master's degree, in public health. I'm going to finish, it's measurable. I have a time, right? Everything like that. So make sure it's kind of like you're writing a recipe for something, is you're telling them exactly what needs to happen. So let's look at another example. So keep department's website up to date. I really, really like this one because I can see where this keep department's website up to date. I can see where this would actually be in someone's job description. And it's great. Maybe that is part of their job. It is their job, right? But let's look at how you can rewrite it to where it's a little bit more measurable and it gives them a little bit more information. So their goal would be attend training for using the web content management system, right? So you're going to make sure they get the knowledge they need first. Then you're going to solicit updates and new material from department managers on the first Friday of each month. Then you're going to publish the new material by the following Friday. It gives them times, right? They know when they're supposed to talk to people. They know when they're supposed to update things. It also gives you as a manager a chance for when you're documenting behaviors, you can go, well, the agreement was that you were going to publish new material by the following Friday, right? So by the second Friday of each month, you're going to be published. So if they're falling short, you have something to go, okay, something's not happening. Let's talk about it. Instead of keep department's website up to date. That's very vague. What does that mean? I update it every 6 months. I update it once a year. What exactly does that mean? All right, so patient family-centered care core competencies. That's that PFCC stuff that we talked about in the very beginning. So this is now part of the performance evaluation, and I'm going to talk about the split on the next slide. But before I do, let's talk about what it means. So anyone that I come into contact with during the workday, this means they are deserving of common courtesy and respect. That means anyone. That means patients, coworkers, managers, anyone, people from the community, anyone I come in contact with, they are deserving of courtesy and respect. It doesn't matter whether I like them or not. It's not about that. So let's talk about that. So the PFCC core competencies. So task, 70% of what you're going to be evaluating employees on is still going to be their work, right? Their normal stuff is part of their job description. And then now 30% is that core competencies. So let's look at them. Respect and dignity, information sharing, participation, and collaboration. So on the clinical and non-clinical sides, these mean some of these definitions kind of are gray, kind of have some gray areas, and some of them are distinctly different in what we mean by them. So respect and dignity, we're going to treat everyone with respect, right? Sometimes that's just acknowledgement. You walk into a room, you're going to greet someone, right? How many of y'all have ever worked in a place where someone walks in the room and they just ignore you, right? Or you start talking to someone and they don't even look away from their computer, right? That's not respect and dignity. Make sure you're acknowledging people. Information sharing, so in the non-clinical, that means that you're not going to not give people information they need. You're not going to watch your teammate fail because they didn't get the important memo that you were supposed to share with them. Or you're not going to kick somebody out of the sandbox and they no longer are privy to information, right? Sometimes this happens. We go, hey, you need to tell so-and-so this too. This is the new rule. I need you to tell so-and-so. And then for some reason you don't. That's not information sharing. Information sharing means that if you're hit by a bus, that doesn't mean that there's no one else that can do your job. That's very hard for people because if I'm the only person that knows how to do something, I translate that as me being valuable. So it's very counterintuitive stuff. Information sharing when it comes to patients, that means that you're sharing information with the right people to give them the best care possible. It's that team approach to patient care, right? Participation, so you can have somebody that is, an employee of yours and they show up, they're not late, but are they really there? So that's full participation in the workday. That's full participation. That's full engagement. Participation in the clinical, that means not only the team that is providing the care, but they're asking for participation from the patient when possible, and or their family or caretakers, right? You're participating in that plan of care. There's full participation. Collaboration, working together, that means working together across departments. And sometimes that's very difficult for us here at UAMS. So it's full collaboration. It's not the recreation of the wheel just because we want to own our own. It's collaborating and working together. All right, so let's talk briefly about evaluation ratings. So 4 exceeds standards, 3 is above average, 2 is satisfactory, and 1 is unsatisfactory. So please, I implore that you do not try to translate this as 4 being an A, 3 being a B, 2 is a C, and 1 is an F. The truth of the matter is these mean exactly what they say. It is scary because there's no buffer between satisfactory and unsatisfactory. So when a person gets a 2, that freaks them out sometimes. So if you have to have that conversation, you have to have that conversation. Satisfactory means that person is doing their job. That means they are meeting all the criteria they were hired for. Satisfactory is not a punishment. It means you're doing what you're supposed to be doing on that task. Okay? 3 is above average. It means they're going above a little bit. They're doing something more than just satisfactory. They're doing something more than just meeting their job requirements. 4 exceeds standards. It means they're doing something that is way above and beyond. It means that's very little interaction, if none, probably none, for you. They're doing things, they're bringing things to the table that are having a very positive effect on your department and your work that you didn't even have to ask for. That is a 4. So, with that being said, you can see it says all 1s and 4s require documentation. All 1s require documentation. This means that you as a manager, you have to be able to say, okay, this is where you're falling short. It's built-in engagement from your end. Think of it that way. Not only that, it requires that documentation because you have to have examples. You can't just say you're not doing your job. Okay? There has to be evidence. Remember, we go back to, Terry needs to communicate better. Well, what does that mean? When you have a real example, then I know what I need to do as an employee. But also, it does require a little bit more work. So if you just give people 2s when they really need a 1, and then it's time you to make that difficult decision about, maybe you don't need them in your department, guess what? You don't have your evidence for that. So make sure that if a person deserves a 1, you have that evidence, you have that documentation, and it gives them the proper feedback that they need. Okay? 4s. Let's talk about that. Please do not be a manager that tells an employee that you just don't give 4s. The reason is that will discourage them. Guess what? You'll never get work that will ever deserve a 4. So, this is accountability on your end. This is the documentation. If someone is doing something that deserves a 4, then you write the documentation. You become accountable. You give them that feedback. Everybody wants that, even those high performers, right? You want to keep somebody plugged in. You want to, retain the talent in your team. You make sure that you recognize their work. All right. Do you agree? Some employees just don't want to be engaged. And you know what? It may seem like that. It may seem like no matter what you do, that employee doesn't really care. They just want to come in, do their work, and then they want to go home. That's what it may feel like, and that's what it might look like. But I want to ask you guys a question. Would you rather have a job where you're routinely asked for input on how to produce the results needed and where you're given feedback that supports your growth? So do you want that job number 1? Or, do you want a job where you're routinely told what to do and how to do it, where there's no consideration that there might actually be a better way, and where you are given either no feedback or constructive criticism? It's your choice. Which one do you want? I guarantee you everybody's going to choose door 1. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. And the next class is going to be the online performance management technical skills. And so it's going to be in my Compass. I know that says training tracker. I think they have turned training tracker on, but double check my work. So here is the main important thing that everyone needs to know. Online performance management skills does not mean that this is online. It is a face-to-face class. You'll be sitting in a computer lab and learning how to use the software. So that is all I have for you guys today, and I just want to tell you thank you for listening, and hopefully this helps. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My name is Lisa Twilley. I'm at UAMS in Organizational Development. Have a great day.